everyone, it's Enjoy English School. I'm Chris Gorski.
I'm Anthony.
And man, I am super proud to be able to talk about our topic today. It's January 10th. We're on pages 22 and 23. Our topic today is Martin Luther King Jr.
哇，今天这个主题非常非常重要，在美国历史上面，好，在不管你可能碰到很多的黑人运动啦等等，你都会有机会听到这个人的名字 Martin Luther King Jr. 我记得我以前在高中的时候，我们还要选那个 I Have a Dream 的那个演讲。那事实上呢，在1月份来讲这个 Martin Luther King Jr. 非常非常适合。今天是1月10号，他的生日是1月15。在下个礼拜一，好，也就是今天礼拜一嘛，下礼拜一的话，刚好也是 Martin Luther King's Day.
So, the first African slaves came to America, were brought to America in 1619. 1619年 the first African slaves, 黑奴隶 were brought to America. Slavery existed in America until 1865. That sounds like a long time ago. It's not. Take one 80-year-old woman, live her whole life, put another 80-year-old woman right here, you have slaves.
哇，天哪
That is not a long time ago.
所以说你想想看哈，他从1619年第一个这个黑人被放到这个美国来，然后变成奴隶，1619年开始到1865年，也就是那个打完南北战争之后，中间这段时间，你想说哇，那好久好久以前哦。如果说今天你把2个80岁的老太太放在一起，放在这边先放一个，再往前放一个，其实你以为很久吗？也没有那么久哎。
That's right. And after the Civil War, after that war ended, you had all these laws that stopped black people from having a fair life. This person changed everything.
所以说之前所有种种这种黑人所碰到的不公不义的现象，在这里 Martin Luther King Jr. 他呢试着想办法去扭转乾坤，让这一切结束。
Let's prepare for our article.
Martin Luther King Jr. Between 1954 and 1968, America saw huge demonstrations and protests by African Americans asking for equal rights. At that time, African Americans couldn't use the same public facilities as white people, or even vote in some states. Worse yet, they were often refused service by shops and restaurants. This inequality was due to the Jim Crow laws. Jim Crow was a fictional black character that was created based on racist ideas many white people had towards African Americans. Named after this character, Jim Crow laws were in effect mostly in the southern states and restricted the rights of African Americans there. Many chose to move to the northern and western states, where there was the promise of freedom. Others stayed to fight for their rights. One such fighter was Martin Luther King Jr. King was born in 1929 in Atlanta, Georgia, and grew up in the Jim Crow South. His father was also a civil rights activist, so King grew up with a strong sense of justice. As King got older, he realized the need for serious social changes. At Morehouse College, King made friends with similar goals, and then began to call for equal rights for African Americans. By 1955, King started leading the fight for civil rights with the support of black communities.
All right, let's jump right into our subtitle today. Learn the story of Martin Luther King Jr. and his fight for civil rights.
好，在这边的话，我们看到副标题，他写说 "Learn the story of Martin Luther King Jr." 让我们认识一下马丁路德金恩2世的故事 and his fight for civil rights。他对这个大家的这个民权的这个努力，他做了多少贡献
All right, very quickly there. This is important because of American history, because of the slavery. 黑是奴隶的问题 We have to be careful. We have the word African Americans. This is the polite word for black people in America. You could still say the word black, but it's less polite than African American. About 50, 60 years ago, 70 years ago, Martin Luther King Jr. 他自己用一个 word 叫 Negro, N-E-G-R-O. 这个也是黑人的意思。You should never say this word. This word is old-fashioned. I'll be honest, if you say it, someone might punch you right in the mouth, and I'm not joking.
没有错。所以在这用词上面，我们要先说明一下，如果要称呼黑人的话，在英文里头最好的说法是 African Americans 来表达说这些黑人。那如果说你是用 the black or blacks 这种说法的话，其实事实上没有那么礼貌。但是以前我们在高中时候学的时候，当时 Martin Luther King 那个年代，他们用一个词来称呼黑人叫 Negro, N-E-G-R-O， 但是这个词已经是过去的词汇。如果你现在在这个时间点还用这个词汇去称呼的话，如果走在美国路上，你称呼人家 Negro， 你可能会被揍。好，这是不是开玩笑的？
Yeah, that's a really serious issue. All right, let's continue here. Between 1954 and 1968, America saw huge demonstrations and protests by African Americans asking for equal rights.
好，我们来看第一段的第一句话，他就说了 Between 1954 and 1968， 在1954年到1968年这段时间呢，美国 America 把它拟人化了saw huge demonstrations and protests， 目睹了见证了很大规模的 huge demonstrations 示威游行 and protests 抗议行动 by African Americans， 也是这些黑人所举行的这些抗议行动。Asking for equal rights. Equal rights 就是平权，能要求他们有得到公平的权利。帮我把这个字demonstrations, protests, and equal rights 画起来，这些字都是非常非常重要的主题。
That's right. Our equal rights is one of our super extra special keywords because we're going to say it a lot. So we need equal rights in our mind. Next, at that time, African Americans couldn't use the same public facilities as white people or even vote in some states.
好，再来第二句话，他要告诉你说 equal rights， 那他当初没有哪些权利呢？好，当初的那些黑人 at that time, African Americans couldn't use the same public facilities， 意思就是有些公共设施他们是不可以使用的你可以使用这个厕所，我进去我就被挡在外面，不能上厕所。或者是他就说 as white people or even vote in some states， 你可以投票，可是在这个州郡里头，如果我是黑人，我不能投票，哪有这种道理？可是在当时就是这个状况。
That's right. Black people and white people could not go to the same restaurants. They could not go to the same schools. They especially could not date or marry. So my wife is Taiwanese. Our marriage in America was illegal. That was 违法的 to marry a person that was not the same color as you, especially a black man and a white woman.
哇，天哪！所以说你可以想象一下，在当时的时候，不同的就是一个白人不可以跟黑人结婚。像老师他的太太呢是台湾人，所以如果他生活在当初的话，这样是不可以，他会被抓去关。
Well, I'm a white man, but people would not be nice to me. A black man marrying a white woman would be killed.
天哪
You would die for that.
Oh no.
Let's continue. Worse yet, they were often refused service by shops and restaurants.
就是刚刚 Chris 老师所讲的这句话，说 worse yet， 更糟糕的是呢 ，they 指的是这些 African Americans。好 ，they were often refused service。好，今天我们不服务你 by shops and restaurants， 很多的餐厅或很多的商店就是不欢迎黑人，不让人家进来这样子。
All right, let's continue on to our next paragraph. Hey everyone, welcome back to Enjoy English School. We're on day 1 of our article on Martin Luther King Jr. Let's continue. This inequality was due to the Jim Crow laws.
好，现在告诉你了 ，this inequality 这个字的话，我们刚刚只提到 equal rights， 对不对？平权，所以这个字的话 ，equal 就是平等的，如果前面加上 in 就是不平等 ，inequality 就是不平等，这样的不平等 was due to the Jim Crow laws， 就是因为吉姆克劳法的造成的。
Jim Crow was a fictional black character that was created based on racist ideas many white people had towards African Americans.
好，接下来我们告诉你什么是吉姆克劳法呢？这是来自于 Jim Crow 这个虚拟的人物 was a fictional black character. 好 ，fictional 就是没有真正这个人，他是一个虚拟的存在。That was created based on racist ideas. 我们讲一下 racist ideas， 就是充满这种歧视的想法啊、言论啊等等。Many white people had. 当时有很多的白人都想说，哇，这个黑人就是很可怕，然后呢，就像 Jim Crow。像他虚拟出来这个人物一样，那么恐怖的这样的存在，好，这种本身这种想法就是 racist， 就是非常非常充满歧视意味的。然后当时呢 had towards African American， 许多的白人都是抱持着这样的想法去看待黑人。
A lot of people actually use science. They use science to say black people were stupid. They could not read. They were more like animals. They committed more crimes. They tried to use science, and this is called what is the word they use? They use science to try to justify Jim Crow, to make Jim Crow a good idea, and it never was. It was always just a racist pile of garbage.
好，所以在这边的话，老师刚刚提到说，甚至当时有些人呢，还想要用打着科学的旗号说，哦，要证明说黑人呢他本身比较笨啦，比较像动物啊，所以我们应该要特别去管理，他们比较容易犯罪啊等等，用这种方式去说服人家那个 Jim Crow 吉姆克劳法他本身是存在的是对的，但事实上根本就是一堆垃圾。
Named after this character, Jim Crow laws were in effect mostly in the southern states and restricted the rights of African Americans there.
好，再接下来就告诉说 named after this character， 所以这个法呢，这一群法一堆的这种法令，就是用吉姆克劳好这样子的一个虚拟的黑人角色来命名的。Jim Crow laws were in effect. In effect, when you say laws are in effect， 就是代表这些法令生效，会生效了，当时是生效了。Mostly in the southern states. Southern， 我们这边特别注意一下这个 S-O-U 的声音。好，如果我们光讲南方，我们会讲 south。ow 的声音
Like mouth.
Like mouth 但是如果你今天要变成形容词的时候，你会念成 southern
Like umbrella.
umbrella 那个的声音好 southern 要特别小心。在南方的州郡 in the southern states and restricted the rights of African Americans there， 所以很多南方的州郡呢都会实施这个吉姆克劳法，然后呢会去限制住在那边的这些黑人他们所有的权利。
So we talked about they would restrict the right to vote in some states. And what they would do is they say, if you can't prove that you passed the 5th grade, 5年级而已, and that sounds like, oh, 当然谁不行. But this is a long time ago, right? So if you can't pass the 5th grade, you have to pass a reading test. And in America, I was a social studies teacher. I do it with foreigners here in Taiwan.And I give them that test. It's available online. You give it to them, 母语英文 BA 大学的一个很聪明的一个人 You have 10 minutes. If you make one mistake, 你不可以投票 Nobody can pass it. It's extremely difficult.
哇，是哦，所以说基本上他们
I'll send it to you later.
哦，好，所以老师就提到说，他们会用一张，他们说宣称说是5年级，你要通过5年级的这个，你就能作答的一些题目，但这些题目呢，你不能犯任何错，如果你犯错了，你就不能投票，一个错你就没有投票的资格了。所以事实上，他用这种方式让很多的黑人没有办法投票。
That's right. Let's continue here in our next sentence here. Many chose to move to the northern and western states where there was the promise of freedom, sort of, honestly.
OK， 好，在这个地方他讲说 many 指的是许多的 African Americans， 好，让当时的这些黑人呢，因为这样的法令限制他们的许多这种公民权利，所以他们就选择 chose to move to the northern and western states， 就慢慢往北，好，或者往西边的这些州郡去移动 ，where there was the promise of freedom， 在那些地方的话，比较能够给予你自由，会答应你，承诺你有这样的自由。老师刚刚讲 sort of， 就是相对来讲比较啦，稍微吧。
Yeah. The South was really bad. It was the worst place. But everywhere for African Americans was bad. There are so many stories about just how bad Black Americans were treated at this time. And it's why? Because they were black? What a terrible reason to be mean to someone. Hey, your skin be out, hey, so you're bad. Like, that's a stupid thing. It's so dumb.
Yeah.
Yeah. Let's continue. Other states to fight for their rights. One such fighter was Martin Luther King Jr.
好，所以接下来就会说了 others， 还有一些其他，有些人搬去西边、北边的州郡嘛，那还有些人怎么做呢？他们选择 stay to fight for their rights， 留在原来的地方，留在南方的州郡， 继续去为他们的这个权利而奋战。One such fighter， 其中一号这样的人物呢 ，was Martin Luther King Jr.， 就是我们今天讲的马丁路德金恩二世。
All right, very quickly. So we'll talk more about MLK in the next paragraph. Sometimes Martin Luther King is called MLK. But let's first talk about why he was such a strong leader. So as a young man, he was the leader, well, his whole life, he was the leader of a church.OK，
所以我们先讲一下这个 Martin Luther King Jr. 的背景哦。那如果说今天你知道他的背景的话，就可以理解说他为什么后面能够做出这么多的就是那么厉害的行动。他以前的话就是从以前年轻的时候开始，就是这个教会里头的领袖了。
So he had lots and lots of practice speaking to big groups and trying to make them feel lots of passion for his religion.
所以在这种讲经布道的过程当中，他非常非常有经验，怎么样呢？给予大家共同的目标，燃起他们的热情。
And lots of people naturally saw him as the leader because he was always at the front talking to all these people.
所以大家对于他在上面讲坛上面讲到的形象，他觉得说，哦，对啊，他就是个领袖啊，就是这样人物，他的形象也深植人心。
And churches often try to help other poor people. They get other people to help other poor people. So he was also very good at organizing big groups.
所以你看像如果说在教会里面，他是希望能够帮助这些穷人，甚至进一步让这些穷人能够聚集起来，再帮助更穷的人。所以说聚集群众，团结起来，是他们常常在做的事情。
All right, let's get ready to take a look at our final paragraph.Hey everyone, welcome back to Enjoy English School. We're beginning our final paragraph on day 1 on Martin Luther King Jr. We're on pages 22 and 23. Our sentence begins, King was born in 1929 in Atlanta, Georgia, and grew up in the Jim Crow South.
好，所以接下来我们看到最后一段的这个第一句话哦，他就告诉你这个金恩出生的这个背景哦。King 这边讲的 Martin Luther King Jr. 他用 King 来表达 was born in 1929 in Atlanta, Georgia. 好，这是南方的州郡。如果各位你们对这个美国不熟悉的话，它就在佛罗里达，你们更晓得在东南方，它的正上方就是 Georgia。OK， 好 ，and grew up in the Jim Crow South， 就是有吉姆克劳法实施的这个南方州郡。
Yeah, you know, usually to be fair, we don't really say Georgia, we say Georgia. That I kind of is a little bit quiet. Georgia is the city where Coca-Cola comes from, and I was lucky enough to visit Atlanta a few times, and I visited Dr. King's church, the Ebenezer Church, and you can still go in there. It's quite old, and people still use it, and it's just like, you can't believe this man was right here. It's hard to believe. Like, I got a little choked up. I wanted to cry being in there.
哇哦，哇！所以说老师今天有幸能够到那个地方，除了去看那个 Georgia 那边他的那个可口可乐工厂之外，他有机会去看到Martin Luther King 他当时的那个教堂。他说进去之后，他其实非常非常情绪非常非常激动，这样。
His father was also a civil rights activist, so King grew up with a strong sense of justice.
好，现在告诉你他的背景，他为什么会从小就有这样的理想跟抱负呢？因为 his father was also a civil rights activist. 好，这个地方 civil rights 指的是民权，他爸爸本身也是推动民权的一个重要的一个推手，很努力的这个民权主义的这个分子哦，很努力的去做。So King grew up with a strong sense of justice. 所以他从小之后，他就在充满了正义感，然后碰到这些不公不义的事情的时候，他有一个非常强烈的正义感在他心中。
So justice is a very strong fancy word for fair. Everybody wants to be fair, and we all understand fair. If your brother or sister gets something more than you do, you feel that's not fair. Maybe the teacher's very nice to this student, you do the same thing, and the teacher yells at you. That fairness doesn't feel good. We all understand fairness. We all understand justice. And Dr. King, even when he was a little boy, understood justice and fairness, and he knew America was not just.
Just 这个字的话，也就是公平正义的这个形容词哦，所以变成 justice 就是它正义这件事情。
As King got older, he realized the need for serious social changes.
好，等到他慢慢年龄渐长了之后呢，我们的主角他就说了 ，He realized the need for serious social changes。他就注意到说，天哪，我们不能这样继续下去。We need 好，或是 the need for something， 就是我们需要什么呢 ？Serious social changes， 我们需要推动社会的重大改变。
At Morehouse College, King made friends with similar goals and then began to call for equal rights for African Americans.
好，所以在当时呢 ，at Morehouse College 那时候 ，King made friends with similar goals， 他就碰到许多志同道合的好朋友，大家都觉得说，对，我们要为黑人这个平权而努力。And then began to call for equal rights for African Americans. 所以这边 if you call for something 就是希望能够呼吁去要求得到这样的东西，希望能够为这个 African Americans 这些黑人们获取更多的平权。
This was something very dangerous to do in the Jim Crow South that we saw in the first sentence of paragraph 3. If you were too noisy about equal rights or things being unfair, then this group called the KKK would come visit you at night, and at first they'll give you a warning. They will put a giant burning cross in front of your house.
OK， 所以说，如果说今天你在这个南方州郡实施吉姆克劳法的地方去高喊黑人平权的话，会有一个特殊的团体叫3K 党，他们呢开始是会给你一个警告，可能在晚上的时候在你的门口插一个非常非常大的一个十字架。
That's right. And if you were still noisy after that, they would kill you.
所以如果你还在继续支持这个平权，然后一直在那边吵吵闹闹的话，对他们来讲，他们下一步就是把你干掉。
Now, the KKK is very famous for their pointy white hoods. So you get Jin to buy some out, and you can't see their face. But in the Jim Crow South, there are a lot of pictures where the KKK takes off their masks with the dead people. There are police, there are judges, there are everyone you know in that town. They will take their masks off with your dead body, and they're not afraid because they will not go to jail.
天哪！所以说今天就算是杀了人，他们也不用担心说他们把他的面罩拿掉，因为老师刚刚提到说他的面罩就是那种尖尖的头，然后白色的。如果说今天你把你杀掉之后，他把这么面罩摘下来，你可能看到这是当地的警察或当地的法官，当地什么，他们面罩拿掉也不怕，为什么？因为他们知道他们这样做不会坐牢。
By 1955, King started leading the fight for civil rights with the support of black communities.
好，最后我们回到我们的文章里面，他就说了 ，By 1955，好，1955年的时候 ，King started leading the fight for civil rights， 他就开始带领了，好，这个不断去冲击，不断去抗争，然后去追求这个平权的行动 ，with the support of black communities， 然后这个行动呢，本身是被很多的黑人社区给支持的。
Now, tomorrow we're going to talk about an important word called boycott, B-O-Y-C-O-T-T, and tomorrow we'll be a little busy. So let's talk about what a boycott is today.
OK， 所以我们明天的话，我们会讲到东西更多内容哦。我们也会提到 boycott 这个词，就是杯葛。那我们简单利用今天还有剩的时间，讲一下 boycott 这个词吧。
So boycott we know means we will not buy your thing because we are not happy with you. But what is the original boycott? Well, boycott was actually a worker for a big landlord, and this worker was not very nice. Now, this was a farmer landlord, not like a 房东 kind of thing. And when you're a farmer, the food you grow is your money. If 你买不到，你没有食物，你不可以卖, then you don't have money. So to get revenge, 报仇 on this bad worker, all the other farmers said, we will not help you. So 他长出来那个食物, you need to pick it, or 他烂掉 and you don't have money. So boycott says, help me. And they said, no, because you're bad. Help me, no. And then his food started to rot, and he says, okay, I will change, I will help you. Only then did they help him get his food, and he lost a lot of money.
所以说这边的话，我们大家都知道 boycott 本身是抵制、共同抵制或杯葛的意思嘛。事实上，它来自一个故事。boycott 呢，它其实是来自一个人名哦。然后呢，那时的情况是这样，就是边有一个非常坏的一个地主，然后他就是对他的这个可能佃农啦，或他工作人很坏。后来这群 为他工作的人呢就决定不下田工作，然后到后来收成都烂掉，然后让这个地主没有钱赚，所以之后呢他就只好变成一个比较好的地主，这样的故事。
That's right. Let's get ready for vocab review. All right, friends, it's time for vocab review. Our first word is civil.
Civil 好，就是市政的，或者是 civil rights 指的话就是人民的权利。
Next, we have a noun or a verb, to vote or a vote.
To vote 好，就是投票， a vote 就是你的票。
Next, we have refuse.
Refuse 就是拒绝的意思。
Next, we have a phrase here, in effect.
In effect 好，这个地方是 when you say something is in effect 就是它搭配 be 动词使用，就是生效，尤其是指法令。
Next, we have our next word is restricted.
Restricted 或者是 restrict something 就是指去限制某样东西，限制某个人。
Next, we have an uncountable noun, freedom.
Freedom 就是自由。
Next, we have another uncountable noun, justice.
Justice 就是正义。
And lastly today, a noun, a goal.
A goal 就是指目标的意思。
All right, and that is all the time we have for today, but day 2, let's learn what Martin Luther King does to change history. This is amazing. For enjoying the school, I am Chris Gorski.
I'm Antony.
And we'll see you tomorrow. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.